Good morning, everybody. And good morning, Karen. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good today.
All right, all right. So we're going to get started right away here. And the first thing is for you to kind of introduce yourself, tell everybody who you are, and what your background in music is, what your journey has been.
Oh, okay. So let's see. I've been living here in this area, St. Pete, Tampa Bay area, since about the early 80s. And before that, I was playing music still. Grew up around Toledo, Detroit, so I was very influenced by Motown and jazz from that area. There were a lot of jazz players that came out of that area. So I heard that growing up. My mother also was a musician, and she had a jazz band, kind of a jazz band, but when you say jazz, that was the style, that was the pop music of her day.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't really call it jazz back then. She just played the music that was popular, the standards that we have made into the jazz standards.
Dance music or whatever.
Dance music, yeah, is what dance music. And anyway, so I hooked up with somebody up there, played piano since I was little, and we ended up going around the eastern seaboard playing the music circuit, like the Holidayans and, you know, those kind of bands, where the lounge bands. And that's probably where I got my early training. So basically I grew up, I made my musical entourage as a singer. And my ex-husband, we had this band. He was the keyboard player, so he didn't really want me messing around too much with the keys. Anyway, so we broke up, and I moved down here and started playing gigs. And I sent different agents my cassette with my ex-husband playing piano and me singing, but I told them it was me doing everything. And I didn't think I was going to get a call like in about a week to start playing gigs here in a hotel in Tampa. And I did. I'm going, oh boy. So anyway, I went on the audition, and I couldn't believe I got the gig. And I called my ex-husband, and I said, you won't believe it, I'm playing 5 nights a week at the Holiday Inn in Tampa. And he goes, how are you going to do that? You don't even know how to play. I said, when I get out of that gig in a month, I'll know how to play. That's how naive I was. Wow. And of course I didn't know how to play, but I faked it all that time. And then I got this opportunity to go to Japan right away, and it was just unbelievable. I was playing behind a singer from New York. She probably hated me, but I was over there for months and months, and I just kept trying to learn how to play on these gigs overseas and all over through Europe and Japan, and playing 6 nights a week, 5 hours a night. I finally learned how to pretty much how to play.
Yeah.
And I'm still learning, because it's a lifelong process, and you never stop learning.
You never really get it.
The spectrum is huge.
Yeah.
That you can keep
what we
going
call on-the-job training.
On-the-job training, OJT.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much what I've been doing. Then I started working with the Clearwater Jazz Holiday through a friend of mine, Dick Krall.
Yeah.
We started this program, which you know very well, Frank. And it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, cool. So tell me, how long have you known George, and how did you guys first meet?
Well, George and I met. I was recording a second album with a bass player. His name's Terry Palomeri, and he wanted to produce an album for me. So we were kind of hanging out. We were at a jazz bar. It was one that Lionel Hampton's cousin or something he had over in
House of Jazz.
Yeah. And we were there. Terry and I were there. We were listening to some music, and George bounds up and says, oh, let me buy you a beer. And I'm going, who is this? I'm going, oh, I know who that is. This George, because I seen him around a little bit, but since I was working so much, I was always working like 5 nights a week at least. And so I really didn't get out too much and see people or hear people or meet other musicians that much. And that's the way it's been for me. But anyway, we hooked up, and he said, oh, let me have your phone number, so maybe we'll do a gig. And a couple of months later, we just hooked up just like that. It was easy hookup for us, and we were simpatico right away. And it was a lot of fun. We had so much fun together.
All right. That's a cool thing. And Marcus Hampton, the trumpet player with the funny mouthpiece.
That's funny.
It's funny because me and Marcus played one of my first big band gigs together up in Clearwater. Yeah, he was a very popular cat. Great. That's good stuff. So, how many years do you think it was ago when you first met him?
So that was at least 15 years ago.
All right.
Yeah.
Cool.
Or maybe more. Yeah, a little. I would round it off to 15.
We know that George was born in Texas and went to college there, and he actually won the Thelonious, was a competitor in the Thelonious Monk Jazz competition. So I was wondering how that growing up in Texas and going to North Texas State and being in the great jazz competitions, how did that affect him? How did it affect his career, his playing, etc.?
Well, George really grew up here in Tampa Terrace, and they moved here when he was about 6 years old. His dad was the brewmaster over at Busch Gardens.
Oh.
And so he got that job, and he grew up here.
Right.
But he happened to get a scholarship for North Texas.
All right.
Yeah. So then he ended up going to North Texas, and he had a full scholarship there. He tells these stories about, how he called up the head of the music department, and he thought everybody was going to be real excited that he was there and everything. And they go, oh, okay, who are you? Okay, good. Just another player, which he wasn't. And I guess he was so good that he never really had to take any of the courses. He just, I don't know, what's it called when you comp the courses, or you opt out of them because you already know all this stuff. And he learned it all himself, or by ear or something, I don't know. But he was just such an excellent player.
Yeah.
And so he took his time. He graduated from North Texas, and he went on the road immediately. I think he went to New York, and he played with the circus at Madison Square Gardens for several years. And he would live up there, and he went to he told me, he says, I went to every jazz club every night. I would just go out, and if I had to stand outside the door, or if I didn't have enough money, I would stand out and listen, and that's what it was all about for him. And I have a real funny picture of him standing in front of the Vanguard with this, looks like a tripod or something, with his legs standing out. He's so happy to be at the Village Vanguard, standing there, sax case down. And he had this one story where he was really young, like 18, the first time he went to New York City, and he took his sax, and he'd only been playing sax for a year or two, because he had started on trumpet when he was a teenager.
Yeah.
But he went to New York, and he was flying over, and the stewardess comes out and says, what do you want? And he goes, I'm going to have a Manhattan. So that was his very first drink he ever had. He was 18, he got a Manhattan in the airplane. He goes down, and he goes to the Village Vanguard. Now I'm going to forget who was there playing that he went to see. And he sat his sax case down. He sat up at the front table because he was thinking they were going to ask him to sit in and stuff. And but he was really young. I think they talked to him and stuff, but he never got asked to sit in. But that was a funny story that he told. Yeah.
It's good that he wasn't scared of anything.
He wasn't. He was never scared, and he always says, when they call your name, run up there. He would tell me. I'm going, what?
Yeah.
So.
But you happened at the Thelonious Jazz competition. How did that go? The Thelonious Monk competition.
So I guess what he had, I think. It kind of goes in cycles. Every year they have a different, instrument that's the, featured instrument. So he did try before, about 6 years before that, and he wasn't accepted. So then he tried again. He did get accepted in, and he was first runner-up. I think that's like a $10,000 prize or something.
Yeah.
And I was looking at that the other day with all the names on there, that the players, and I didn't recognize any players that really went on, to become pretty famous or anything. But he told me some stories about that. He said it was so cold. I forget what month it was that he went there, but it was in this auditorium, and they had left the doors in the backstage open, and I guess it was really, really cold, and his horn was real cold and everything. So it seemed like it was kind of unfair that, you'd have to play with really frigid conditions like that. But anyway, he did come in first runner-up, and I forget who won.
Well,
But,
that's a good thing.
And then they had, after that, a day or two after that, since it was held in Washington, D.C., and after that, he was invited to the White House, all the players that had been in the competition, and there was something else going on too, some kind of big thing where there were all these really well-known actors, players, people that were interested in jazz. And Barry Harris, he was one of the judges, but all kinds of people, Natalie Cole, and he was telling me all these people that were at this big reception, and he took his sax. He was hoping Bill Clinton was going to be there, but he had been out of town, and Al Gore and Tipper were there. And he was hoping to hook up with Bill Clinton because he played sax. Remember that? Remember how...
he was a great sax player, too.
Yeah, he was into it, so George was hoping, but it didn't work out.
Yeah.
But he took his dad to Washington, D.C., to the White House, and to, that whole thing, so I'm sure his dad was real proud of him, which George was always probably wondering about that his whole life, because his dad was an engineer, and completely different, not any kind of artistic...
Right.
Temperament like George had, and so they were kind of a lot different. George was never into any sports, and his dad was, although George did play tennis, but not really into any sports, golf, or anything like his other son was. But it must have been a proud moment for both of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, sometimes it's
not
like
too
that.
many people get invited to play at the White House.
No, not at all. Not at all. Not many people get invited to even go visit.
There.
So it's a very special occasion for sure. I'm sure you kept it close to his heart. That's some exciting stuff, And the truth of the matter is, there are a lot of what I call unsung heroes in this music we call jazz.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you know the few people. I was just talking about Robert Glasper, who everyone knows. But if you asked someone to name his bass player or his drummers or his this or his that, that participate equally in making those recordings and making all that big noise that he's making, no one could actually do that. That does not mean those people are not substantial, or they're not great musicians, or they do not deserve fame. It's just that that's not how things are marketed. And there are a lot of people who are simply kept in the shadows, so to speak, because the promoters only can promote so many people, I guess. I don't know.
And that's also luck, I think, where you are, who you know, somebody that can push you, because a lot of people with the artistic temperament do not have a, outgoing personality.
That's all a part of it.
Yeah, that's a big part of it, I think.
Business acumen or any of that kind of stuff. Like people don't want to deal with the politics involved in it.
Politics,
so they take a back seat and let someone else drive the car. You know what I mean? They just go for the ride. So that's for sure. So obviously, you guys played together a few times. So tell us about that journey. What was it like playing with him? What are some of the places you played? And how long did you all play together?
Well, we started playing probably right away. I had all these gigs, and George would tag along and play at some of my gigs, and I was always like trepidatious because I was saying, oh God, I'm going to get fired, because, he has this, I didn't know if lots of people do not like to hear the saxophone. They want to, at my gigs, the kind I had, where they were talking and small, intimate restaurants, but he was so great, and he could play. He goes, nobody can play as soft as I can, and that's a really hard thing to do when you play tenor saxophone, is to be able to play softly. But so he kept working on that, and everybody learned to love him. And I mean, not that they had to learn it, and he was so melodic, and I don't know, I'd have to think of a lot of words, but he's a great player.
Yeah,
really great player.
I agree with a great player. I mean, I know for sure he was a great player because one of my sons, both of my sons are very critical. But my young son is extremely critical of everybody. He doesn't like anybody, But then as a young person, he played with the best of the best of the best. So no one was ever as good. But I remember him having an occasion to play with George, and it probably was on one of Buster's gigs downtown St. Pete.
and he came home and he was raving about George's playing.
Yeah.
And he said, man, that guy should not be in St. Pete. He should be in New York, man. He don't believe, oh my God, he needs to be in New York. He can play. He got a lot to say. He's creative. He got control. He was just going on and on and on. So the question becomes, why did George stay around St. Pete, Clearwater?
Yeah.
Why didn't he
That's a
go to
big
New York
question.
and play, or go to LA and play, or go to a bigger
Yeah.
market and for jazz and play?
Well, he did, when he was coming out of North Texas, he did make an album. It was back in those, 85 he graduated from North Texas. So it would have been like the late 80s. And remember that time it was like that fusion, kind of funky jazz kind of thing. So I was kind of dated now when you listen to it. There's a few songs that are really beautiful on it, some ballads. And he wrote every tune on the album, by the way.
All right.
And so he did have that going. And he told me the story about how, he's trying to get it marketed, trying to get a manager or whatever, whatever you do to get that going. And I guess finally there was somebody that called him. He just got kind of sick of the whole thing.
Yeah.
And finally somebody called him that was legit. Because I guess some of his friends, he had a lot of prankster friends. He was kind of a prankster too. And he had a lot of prankster friends. So they'd be calling him and say, oh, George, man. They like disguise their voice and say they were from some. Anyway, so then somebody called him up that was legit. And he hung up on him. And I said, well, why didn't you call him back? And he says, I was over it by then. But the thing about New York, he did go to New York and he did play. I mean, like I said, he was up there a little bit for a few years playing in the circus, and he got to know players and stuff. So he did play on people's albums up there a little bit for, 3 years. But living up there, he decided, and he went out to LA too, doing different things. But he decided he was a real family guy and a home guy. He wanted to be in his house. And he said, he would rather play with guys down here that he knew and he loved and stuff than be up there going through. He goes, oh man, everybody's so bitter up there. Everybody's bitter. And he didn't want to turn out like that, So he loved his family. He had a great family life, and he had a lot of friends down here, and he could go anywhere and sit in any time, and everybody would say, oh yeah, man, he wouldn't have to even ask. So as soon as he walks in the room, people would want him to come sit in. So he played. And what he had that kept him going, he had a saxophone and an band instrument business before the internet really hit. So he did pretty well with that. He would travel around. He would buy like phones in different areas and put in ads with the local phone number of that phone that he bought at the area.
Right.
And then people would call, like their husband died, they had a bunch of saxes there, and they thought they were calling somebody that lived in that area, which sounded probably better to an older person,
Yeah.
And so George said, oh yeah, I'll make it over in about 3 hours. He'd just jump in his car and drive across the state, and he never tried to rip anybody off. In fact, he gave people really, he was real fair with people, more than fair, because I went with him on a lot of those little bouts around the state, mostly, between Macon and Florida, all of Florida. So he did pretty good with that. Then when the internet hit and people started looking up everything and trying to sell it online for lots more than the things were worth, because they thought, oh, I can get this, but they really couldn't because it needed all this work and blah, blah.
Right.
But the business went down, so.
Yep.
But that's when it kicked in, though, when we started working with the Clearwater Jazz and all that, so it kind of worked out all right.
All right. Okay. Well, that's a good thing. Things happen for a reason, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good thing. Well, I do know the whole home thing, and one of the good things now is that a lot of guys who work out of New York, guys who work at Lincoln Center Jazz Orchestra and things like that, they don't live in New York anymore. They live in Houston, they live in Atlanta, they live in, Macon, Georgia, they live wherever. Because in this country, you can get almost anywhere in 2 hours on a plane, so it's not, you're never too far away. And New York is dog eat dog. And unless you're one of the big dogs, it can make you quite bitter.
Yeah.
Because you're always fighting for scraps. And I'm sure he saw a lot of those people who were fighting for scraps and losing the fight. You know what I mean? So I can understand that. And if he lacks home and family,
It's important to him.
yeah, you can get a good home down here for what you can only get a studio apartment for up there. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So there's also the economics about it. A question I do remember, and I'm going to kind of throw it in there now, is there was a question about George's saxophone. Number one, that he took very good care of his instrument, and he was like, he babied it, you know. But occasionally, some people would have the occasion to carry his instrument, and they would find that it was extremely heavy.
Okay,
And they
I know
didn't
you're going.
understand how a saxophone could weigh so much. Do you have any insights on why his saxophone case was so heavy?
Yeah. Well, first of all, it wasn't really the saxes that he was protecting. He had a lot of saxes that were Naked Lady and all these different ones that were worth a lot of money, Mark IV, Mark VI, whatever.
Yeah.
And but he played one that wasn't that expensive. He always, well, maybe it was, I don't know. He would tell everybody it was worth about $300. Knowing George, he would tell people that.
Yeah.
He took care a lot. He really took care of watching what he said to people, and he always was kind of after me to be more careful and this and that. But the thing that he was really freaked out about all the time was his mouthpieces.
Yeah,
He would, when we would go out of the house, he would like hide. He would put them in all these socks, and he'd hide them in drawers and stuff like that. His mouthpiece, I'm going, oh, for Pete's sake, you know. And yeah, he was very protective of his mouthpiece. And but the other thing that you're talking about, oh well, I think we can all surmise what that was. So even his dad, when he was younger, his dad would go to gigs with him. This was before I knew him, and his dad would follow him, and his dad would carry a sax case too. It wasn't the extra sax that you might think that it would have been for him to play. It was.
Did it have something to do with his father's work as a brewmaster for? Is that what it had something to do with that, huh?
It had something to do with that.
Oh,
So-
12 ounces plus 12 ounces plus 12 ounces
Yeah.
plus 12 ounces plus 12 ounces can get pretty heavy, can't it?
It was heavy.
Yeah, we got the story.
Because George was a heavy cat. So
Yeah.
there you go.
And he has
Heavy cat player.
6 feet 7 inches
6 feet
to
7.
fill up there.
Yeah,
So
he could take a lot.
yeah, it
It's
took a lot,
tall-
I'd
tall
imagine.
drink.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so that's what that was about. A lot of fun. He was so funny. He was very funny.
So, you know, we've talked about the fact that you and George like started dating almost as soon as you started playing together, pretty close, right?
It was, yeah, it was all the
And
same.
So how did having a romantic relationship affect having that musical relationship on stage or in rehearsal or whatever?
Okay, so when I was playing, when I mentioned before that I had a band with my ex-husband,
Yeah,
that was really hard because he was not very forgiving of my talents at that point, which weren't that great probably either. But George is just the opposite, and he would never say anything. He might say, "Oh, you know, why don't you try this chord right there? This might be better. This play the dominant there." And so he goes, "Actually, I'm getting used to the major seventh there now. I kind of like the major seventh there, you know." And I go, "Oh, okay." Then we'd end up playing the major seventh. But yeah, he was so open, and any players or anything that would come up that weren't very great at all, he did not care. He said, "You know, it's just like what I think it is. It's the spirit. The spirit is what's important." And so he was so good that way. He didn't care how bad you played. But no, we had never had any arguments or anything. He was only encouraging. Only always encouraging. He was a very special soul and spirit.
But
Beautiful,
that's special
beautiful
because
spirit.
when you have people that are looking over their shoulder at you and making
No.
you know what I'm saying,
I never-
unkind
yeah.
eyes and sneering and
I
making
never
grunts and
felt,
stuff.
yeah, I
Yeah.
never felt intimidated at all.
Yeah. That's
And
a cool
actually,
thing.
I taught George some things because I was doing a lot of old folks' homes at the time too, where he would come and sit in with me. And I played a lot of that Americana music, like, I don't even know what it is. Oh, You Beautiful Doll and all that kind of stuff from the, from the 20s and 30s. And he didn't know those songs, but he knew every other song. And once he heard the song, he could play it. So so he learned a lot more tunes playing with me. He learned all the 20s and 30s tunes, and he loved it. He would say, "Wow, I don't really feel like going to these old folks' homes." He says, "But when I get there and play, and after I'm done," he goes, "I just have a really good feeling when I walk out of there." And yeah, so it was
that's
fun.
good.
Yeah.
So when you think about playing gigs with George, when you think about all the gigs you played and all the solos he took and all the different situations you all worked in, what is the main things about his playing that you remember? It's the main thing about the way he played that set him apart from other people.
I don't
and made
think I
him so
can.
special.
I don't think I can define that. I think you would just have to listen. He was so great, and
But for you, what touched you about his playing?
just his sound. His sound was amazing.
All right.
I loved his sound, and just his. Oh, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I love his sound,
Yeah.
and I love his sounds because he could get different sound depending on what he was doing.
He could sound like an oboe with that
Yeah.
sax.
He could do whatever he wants to do with that sound. He had good
Yeah.
control of his sound. He had a basic sound, but if he needed more edge, he had it. If he needed more brightness, he had it. If he
Yeah,
needed
he
more
could-
this, he had it.
Yeah.
But for me, I used to listen very intently to his solos, and there was always some humor in there. You could always hear his smile and his personality.
You could.
And
Very good.
It was almost like a conversation, like it just kept going and it made sense. One line led to
You
the
know, makes
next
sense.
line.
Yeah, it wasn't just a lot of scales.
Yeah, no. He would create these ideas and he would build one idea on the next idea on the next idea, and it would constantly be ascending
Ascending. It was absolutely ascending.
Yeah.
And I even had this dream once where he was standing behind me at that Italian restaurant where I used to play, and he was going da-da-da-da-da, like doing that thing with that big ascension. I'm going, oh my
Yeah.
God. And I woke up, I'm going, oh, thank you for that dream. It was really great. And I could hear that ascension of, and it was wonderful. But you were very good. You're a much better articulator of
Yeah, well, I have a lot of respect for George. I mean, number one, when either one of my kids comes to me and say, this guy is someone you need to go listen to, I take that serious because they know if they tell me to go listen to somebody and I go and listen and I'm disappointed, they're going to hear it when I get back because I don't want to get set up for a great meal and get a McDonald's cheeseburger. If you tell me this is going to be a great meal, it better be a banquet when I get there, you know what I mean? And with George, it was always a banquet, and I get to listen to the music, but also get to listen inside the music, so to speak. Do you know what I mean?
That's the best.
And
When you can get there, that's the
yeah, I
best.
need to listen inside the music, and so I spent a lot of time listening to the special things he did, and I would also like to watch his face sometimes because, like I said, he did have a lot of humor, and you see him do things that were entertaining to him. Do you know what I mean? Like for me, he was literally a big kid in a playground.
That could be.
He was just having fun, so
Yeah,
I had to have.
there were
really-
some stories about when he was at North Texas, and they had these practice rooms, and I guess he was real famous for a lot of the sax players would just come and sit outside the door and listen to him practice.
Oh yeah, I can imagine.
And I guess he used to practice, like he told me, sometimes 16 hours a day,
Yeah.
to the point of where he ruined the tendons in his fingers,
Yeah.
and he couldn't ever pick up anything heavy or anything. So
In George's obituary,
yeah.
it was said that he did not try to make a living playing the saxophone.
Mm-hmm.
He played music to live, or he lived to play music.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Can you expand on that a little bit?
Well, I think, you know who I think wrote that? I think that was Dick Kroll who thought of that, because he's so good at thinking like that and those kind of things. But I guess some of the things that we touched on points to the fact that George didn't make much of a living playing sax,
Yeah.
although he should have and could have. And all of his friends, and I don't care, people that knew him that I talked to after he died and this and that, everybody, it's like a big bewilderment. What? Why isn't he, why didn't he? And everybody, well, maybe it was this, maybe it was, but anyway, nobody really knows. And the only George knows, he wanted to stay home. He didn't care. He was over it. He knew he was great, but he didn't go around telling anybody it was okay. He was great, and he was at the top. He was at the top of his class, or of class of playing sax.
Yeah.
Now I'm not talking about college, but he was world class.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that.
And I guess that was enough for him, or maybe who knows, maybe he had some premonition of dying early. He had said some things to me about that were curious, about how he knew some people that were good players, but they ended up trying to make a living because they had a family and they went to work for the concrete people or whatever. And then they were sad, and then all of a sudden they got cancer and died, and they never got to play. So he said a few things to me like that. So who knows what's in people's minds? But he didn't care. As long as he could play some. And I think it was really good that we hooked up, because I was so interested in music, and we would listen to lots of YouTube, videos and concerts and stuff. And wow, he listened to music so much. He would fall asleep still in all the later years listening he had so many cassettes that he had recorded off of, what was that guy's name? Vic Hall from the WUSF. He used to have one of the first jazz
I know you're
programs.
talking about it. Unfortunately, I can see him
Yeah.
clear as day. I can't remember his name. What is
And
his
he
name?
would record all these programs
Yeah.
and listen to them over and over.
Yeah.
And then at some point, he even stopped playing sax the way he knew how, because he figured out there was this other way that he could play that would be even better, and it would take him into this other category that nobody even knows about. And I'm still trying to figure out who I can talk to that would know, who could tell me something about that, because he stopped playing. He had to forget everything he learned. And this was in his maybe he was probably in his, I don't know, he might have been in his late 30s or 40 or something, and he stopped playing, and he said, oh, I can do it this way instead. So, but he had to relearn everything, and that made him an even better player. And nobody knew how to do that, and it was something special. I don't remember what he said, how he learned it, but...
Yeah. And it happens to musicians who do things a certain way, and they get to a point at which it's more difficult to continue to get better, because there is something in the habits they have in their playing that's limiting how far they can go.
Limiting.
So they go back to square one and rebuild themselves from the ground, and then they pass that place they were in a couple of years and continue to go to places they never could have gone, doing it their old way.
Isn't that great?
One of the most famous of these is Terrence Blanchard. He was going through that, and he, at the point he was doing that movie Mo Better Blues, there's that fight scene, allegedly the fight scene, where Denzel is playing the lead trumpet player, and these guys attack him, and he tries to stop Spike from getting beat up, and the guy turns around, takes his trumpet out of his hand, and hits him right in the mouth. It just completely destroys his mouth, and pretty much ends his career. Well, the music, the soundtrack for that is just screaming, very angular music, and it requires all this real high note stuff on the trumpet, right? Terrence couldn't do that. So they had to bring someone else in to record that segment of the soundtrack. That someone else allegedly was Winter Marsalis, who was recording with a pseudonym because he was under contracts to someone else. And at that point, Terrence quit playing for 4 years. And he could do that because he was already writing and composing, but he rebuilt himself during those 4 years. And when he came back on the scene, he continued to go far beyond what he ever had going, what he ever would have gone had he stayed on the track he was in. So I'm sure George made a similar discovery that he had hit a brick wall, and so he needed to go back at square one in order to do that whole leapfrog thing.
Perhaps
so
that was it, yeah.
That takes a special musician, number one, to realize that you aren't all that you can be, because most guys think they're more than what they are. Do you know what I mean? You got those egos. And then the second thing is to think about giving up everything you've accomplished to go back to easy steps to the band.
And,
you know, I'm going to rebuild myself from scratch.
And you're not going to sound good for those few years.
Oh, no, you're going to sound bad. You know, and that takes a lot of, you got to be a brave person.
You got to be brave.
And it takes a lot of confidence in yourself.
Kind of like jumping off a cliff, being blind or something.
It takes a lot of spirit. So I have a lot of respect for him being able to do that. You mentioned that he wrote all the music on one of his earlier albums. Did he continue to write music and compose throughout?
He did, and there's I didn't even know this, which he did not tell me. I learned it after he died, because a couple of the people that loved him so much from North Texas called me and told me about all this big band music that he wrote. He told me he was arranging big band music back then, but I didn't know he was also writing it. And then I found some cassettes and this and that, but I need to convert those cassettes over to something. I would like to make a compilation of a lot of his music onto an album, and I got somebody that's going to help me do that. I got to just get started. I'm going to ask people if they have different recordings, because there's people that have things of him, you know. And hopefully I can get that going pretty soon.
It would be a nice project.
It'd be really nice. So he did write a lot, but he didn't really talk about that much with me about anything about big band or his writing. And I don't know why, but that was a big surprise for me when I found that out. I didn't know that.
Well, another thing is sometimes in his solos he would be caught up in the passion of the moment, and he would start going out a little bit. Get more and more explorative. He would go exploring, right? So you're playing piano, and you're headed down the road to this next town, and all of a sudden George takes a
detour.
And you're still trying to figure out we're still going down this road. So how did you deal with the fact that he takes all of these chances in his solos and you're left to accompany him? How do you keep yourself focused on what you're supposed to be doing in that situation?
Well, fortunately, usually when we played, I had Billy on bass playing with me, playing with us, and he was...
And that's Billy Pulicheri,
Billy Pulicheri, and so you know how he lays it down. So he laid it down, and if I would get lost, I'd have to do is listen a little bit, and I could tell. But yeah, you're right. It can you start listening to those syncopations and stuff, and you can get thrown out
Yeah.
pretty easy. But Billy, fortunately, could really lay it down, and he loved George so much, and it was so much fun when all three of us played together.
Yeah.
We had the KGB trio. Karen, George, and Billy, the KGB. So anyway, we were playing some gigs and we did some stuff. But George, and after, in the last years, George, he just gave me these compliments about, sweetie, I don't know what it is. I think it's because you're listening to me so much, but your playing is really coming along the last year or two. And he goes, it must be osmosis or something. He goes, I really can't get over it, how, you're really starting to. And I'm going, I just didn't say anything. I go, really? I was so excited that he thought that.
It's something I heard in an interview. But once again, Robert Glasper, he was talking about working with Herbie Hancock. And Herbie started playing some stuff, and Robert's like, what am I supposed to do, man? You way out there doing this stuff. You don't tell anybody anything. You just start playing. What am I supposed to do? And Herbie looked at me and smiled and said, react. And that's really what it is. You react to what it is you're hearing, and 9 times out of 10, if you just trust yourself and take a chance, you're going to land up right in the middle of the sweet spot. You know what I mean?
Well, Herbie tells that story about when he was young playing with Miles, and how he played that one wrong chord, and he was like cringing because everything was going along, and then he's playing, and he goes, oh no, Miles is going to come up, and he did. Miles came up over to him and said, hey man, that was pretty cool. And Miles actually takes the chord and makes something out of it. I don't know if he came up to my camera, but he never got, beat up for it. Miles took the chord and took off with it, and the wrong chord. And Herbie was so grateful for that, because he was young playing with them, and so that's why they call it jazz.
Miles had the attitude. There's no such thing as wrong notes. There's just bad approaches and ungraceful exits.
And you're only a half a step away from
the right note.
From the right note.
Every wrong note is right next to the left one. That's for sure.
This has been great. Just talking about this. Are there any things that we haven't discussed that you would like to say about George, or relationship you and George had, or any plans for the future in relation to memorials for George, etc.? Anything you'd like to say about?
Well, I mentioned that I wanted to start that album of compilation. We had such a great time together playing music, and everybody looks back at things that they've done in their life and they think, why didn't I appreciate that more when it was happening? And that's me. So I wish I would have appreciated it more. But George did appreciate things, and even when we would kind of talk about that topic, he goes, not me, man. I appreciate it. I'm right there. He was right there. He was in the moment, and he did appreciate everything. And I'm so grateful that we were together for those years, and I got to be involved in that music with him. I definitely am.
A couple things, just to close it. Did George ever teach?
He didn't like teaching. I was trying to get him to start like a little music school. I thought, why don't we do that? We could start like a little music school and have people come over. I could get piano, and because I was teaching a little bit, and he wasn't crazy about that at all. But there was a rule: if you were a student of George's, you had to be able to drink a can of beer in one gulp. And before, he had to like have a beer, and he would stand there and watch you. If you could drink the whole can of beer in one gulp, then you were privy to be.
You were in the middle of the club, huh?
Yeah, you could be in.
The Chinese call that goombay.
Crazy.
Not goomby, goombay.
Goombay.
And
So that was part of his joking manners.
So other than his love for music and jazz, and of course you and the family, Did George have any other interests or hobbies or anything outside of his music?
Well, he loved pets. He had a Chihuahua that he was so crazy about, and he had different pets in his year, so he was a pet lover.
Okay.
And not really, he loved Impractical Jokers. He loved that show.
Yeah.
So, because he was an impractical joker, and a lot of his friends were. They used to do crazy stuff. I've heard a lot of stories about when he was younger, different kooky things they used to do.
Yeah.
And he had a word for it. What was the word? I can't remember right now. Darn it.
Yeah.
Hijinks.
Yeah.
Hijinks. That was one of his favorite words. So,
Hijinks.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he
Well,
was just a really all around, just the best person you could ever wanna know. And I was lucky. How was I so lucky?
Well, you know what? I think we'll end it on that. He's just one of the best people you'd ever want to know.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the appropriate way to end this. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Love
you.
you, Frank.
I love you too, Karen. And thank you for watching.
Come fly with me, come fly, let's fly away. If you could use some exotic booze, there's a bar in far Bombay. Come fly with me, come fly, let's fly away. Come fly with me, let's float down to Peru. In old Llama Land, there's a one-man band, and he'll toot his flute for you. Come fly with me, let's float off in the blue.